Welcome to Lawyers Who Care, the video show podcast that highlights attorneys who go above and beyond for their clients. And on each episode, we will meet a new lawyer and they will share stories about when they went beyond legal counsel for the benefit of their client. My name is Andrew Samalin. I'm the principal of Samalin Wealth, a award-winning wealth management firm for lawyers, law firms, and their clients. And let's applaud lawyers who care and learn from them. Today, my guest is Deborah of Deborah Schmidt, PLLC. And she specializes in estate planning and elder law. And Deborah is in Richardson, Texas. Welcome, Deborah.
Hello, good morning.
So, Deborah, tell us about your firm. Tell us how you came to the law.
I actually entered the law through the back door. I was a mediator for 8 years with high conflict divorce families. My specialty was the child care plans and helping people like myself who are just soccer moms figure out how to navigate weekend activities, the cost of all of the things that young children bring while dividing a household, right? Because that's an exorbitant challenge, just two people. But then when you add the little ones in, it was a real source of conflict. So I specialized in the parenting plans, and I also did some supervision for those higher conflict families that were having trouble, we'll just say, adhering to them. It ended up being a lot of coaching, a lot of one-on-ones with people trying to dial back the emotions. After law school, I specialized in probate and guardianship. And that is also a very highly emotional area of the law. Whereas with childcare in a divorce situation, you're worried about dividing time equally between two parents that have possession of a growing child or children. With guardianship, it's the other end of the developmental spectrum. We have people that are aging out and losing capacity, and their families are trying to figure out a way to divide them up almost. Whereas my divorcing parents all wanted as much of the child's time as possible, sometimes in families with an elder person whose abilities are strongly compromised and whose mental facilities may be failing. Several siblings may be trying to find the balance to keep their own lives going and then see as much of mom or dad as possible, or a grandparent. And so it's almost a hot potato game where they're like, Andrew, can you take her this weekend? I'm like, I really can't. I've got a wedding. And then they'll call me and say, hey, Deb, can you go watch Granny? I've got to be out of town and I'll have to shuffle some things and miss a couple soccer games to go do that. But watching over our elderly people that weren't integrated into our homes requires a different level of just machinations and calendar coordination. And even if you just run a small law office like I do, coordinating me and one legal assistant, there's a lot of texting back and forth. Hey, what time are you available, Julie? And can you come in today? So when you're trying to do this on a 24/7 basis, much less make sure that the people who are coming in and managing that person's daily care are doing their job, that type of communication is very, very important. So I do a lot of coaching about how to keep that calendar transparent and make sure people are paying attention to it so that our elders don't get just left behind. And then the other issue that I work with is conflict between those family members, because some people don't think other people do the job as well as they do. Even if you and I just do it differently, there may be more than one way. But there's some
disagreement. And Deborah, when we started, there was a story that you wanted to share with us. Do you think you could share that with everybody today?
Sure. I think the thing that makes me unusual is that I'm a lawyer that makes house calls, right? I'm bringing back the 1940s model where, the pediatrician, you should show up on your front door and help the kid get the pee out of their nose. So when you have an older person that is starting to struggle.
By the way, have you ever done that?
I have had that done for my child. It was actually a skittle, but yes. Okay. Motherhood carries a multitude of new experiences. So all of the things you can't predict that happen on a moment's notice. I just went to the home of an elderly gentleman who had lost his wife this month to pick up her death certificate, to look over her will, to sit with him and his son, who's going to take over the executor role for that will, and explain to them why it's of a benefit to the family. The son was reticent to take the responsibility away from dad. He didn't want dad to lose the privilege of being the executor. And as I sat at the kitchen table with these people, we had to continually repeat ourselves for the gentleman to hear me. And I told his son, it's really not a privilege. There's a burden, but a blessing in being able to do that for your family. And he's named as the alternate executor. So sitting with people that have a valid estate plan, when it comes into play that you have to probate that will, and explaining to them how simple the process can be with a will and how helpful it is for a child to step into the alternate executor role when it's allowed in the will, to take that burden off of the surviving spouse, especially when they have a compromised ability. Like in this case, my gentleman knew everything about what was going on, but he was hard of hearing. And so that's going to make a court hearing very difficult for him, right? And so we want dad to feel welcome to come along and watch the process. But the son was reticent to step in and take that role until I was able to understand by sitting with both of them in an environment that the older person is comfortable in and evaluate the potential client and talk to him about, his son taking that role. So in that meeting, which I do just as a straight rate, just without future obligation, I was able to tell them which one of them should be my client. In this case, the son retained me to probate the will for his mother, and dad is going to be, of course, included. He's the sole beneficiary of the will, so nothing will change about what he receives except the duty to go through all his executor roles. And then this week, I've been working with a young lady whose sister is in memory care and is trying to get a guardianship over her because she's unable to manage her estate. I've met with her 3 times in 3 days, and I'll meet with her again this morning at 10 a.m. to make sure we get all the documents signed that are required to go before the court for a guardianship application. In this case, we had to accelerate it to an emergency temporary guardianship to prevent some fraud against this family member, actually by another family member. So that's a cautionary tale.
And it's interesting, Deborah, because that, in an age of no helplines and, everything's done online, the fact that you will do, quote unquote, the 1940s house call, kind of sets you apart. Everyone, just so we all know, this is the Lawyers Who Care video show podcast that highlights attorneys that go above and beyond for their clients. Today, my guest is Deborah Schmidt of the law offices of Deborah Schmidt, PLLC in Richardson, Texas. Deborah, so that people can get in touch with you, could you share your how people can get in touch with you?
Absolutely.
Phone number.
My email is my name, Deborah, DEBORAH, at trustdjs.com. So my website is TRUST, my initials DJS.com. And my
Wonderful.
office number's 214-831-8831. And that phone is answered 24/7.
Can you repeat the number?
Yes, sir. You can call us at 214-831-8831.
Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for educating us as to how you do it and the care with which you handle your practice. If you're an attorney or no one that might be appropriate for this podcast, please reach out to us at 914-666-6600, 914-666-6600. Again, my guest today, Deborah Schmidt. Deborah, excuse me. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure, Andrew. Thank you for having me.